We want to bring back our team coverage, Trey Yingst, Jennifer Griffin, General Jack Keane, and John Roberts. Trey, let me begin with you. A year ago, when the Prime Minister gave this speech, at the same time, you were covering the story about explosions happening as Nasrallah met his end. And the Prime Minister started off the speech reminding everybody about what Israel was able to accomplish at that point. Thoughts from you overall, and also about this decision to have the IDF place these loudspeakers in Gaza?
Yeah, absolutely. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu actually pulled out a map to show all of the fronts that his country has been fighting on over the past 2 years. And he talked about the success with the Israeli operation, not only against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but specifically against the Iranian regime during the 12-day war that took place earlier this year. Netanyahu also used this opportunity to push back against allegations of genocide inside the Gaza Strip. And it's important to remember that the UN is not a court of law, although it is a court of public opinion. And we saw many of those delegates walking out at the beginning of his speech because they wanted to send a message about the ongoing fighting inside Gaza that now is at day 721. The Israeli leader also importantly talked about the remaining hostages that are in Hamas captivity. 48 of them, 20 are believed to be alive. And he used these remarks through loudspeakers lined up along the Gaza border to speak directly to the hostages, both in Hebrew and in English, trying to send a message that the Israelis are still fighting to free them from Hamas captivity. The one question that we have here is how this war is going to end. And we have to remember that while Israel and the United States is at the negotiating table, they are negotiating with a terrorist organization. And that is Hamas, a group that has repeatedly rejected many efforts to try to reach a ceasefire deal to bring the hostages home and ultimately end this conflict.
Yeah, as you heard Netanyahu just at the beginning of this speech saying that we've crushed the bulk of Hamas terror machine. We've hammered the Houthis. I want to bring in our colleague and my co-anchor from America Reports, John Roberts, as you join our coverage. Get your thoughts on what you just heard, John, and the message that he sent, as he also at one point, John, offered a pop quiz to those at the UN General Assembly. Who shouts death to America? He raised a sign. The answers were Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, to which he said all of the above. Your thoughts, John?
And then he also said who has murdered Americans in cold blood. And again, the correct answer was all of the above. I thought that was a very effective way for Benjamin Netanyahu to say this is not just about Israel. This is about far more than Israel. This is about the United States. This is about other nations throughout the world. He was also very, very hard on European nations like Britain and France, who say that they will recognize a Palestinian state. Macron was visiting with President Trump at the United Nations General Assembly earlier this week. President Trump was very tough on him, saying, look, you can't do that because that would be to honor October the 7th. Macron tried to say, well, listen, nobody's going to forget October the 7th. But what Netanyahu did was he framed it, in very, very stark terms. He said that recognizing a Palestinian state with Hamas in charge is giving the ultimate reward for October the 7th. He said that would be like awarding Al-Qaeda a state a mile away from New York City in the days after 9/11. So Netanyahu wasting no words in expressing his displeasure with European nations for what he believes is giving a big gift to Hamas. He also talked about the promise of the future, and General Keane has been making these points all morning long. Possibility of negotiations with Syria for a security agreement, maybe not a normalization of relations, and the possibility Netanyahu was holding out of doing something similar with Lebanon if they will help to disarm Hezbollah. But of course, all of this hinges on the lingering conflict with Hamas in Gaza. And until that ends, all of this is being held at abeyance, Sandra.
And General Keane, I'll have you listen to one point that Netanyahu was making about President Trump and how they have shared this threat.
President Trump understands better than any other leader that Israel and America face a common threat. He showed the world that when Iran and its proxies murder Americans, take Americans hostage, shout death to America, burn American flags, and try to assassinate the President of the United States, not once, but twice. He showed them there is a price to pay for all that.
General Keane, your thoughts on that and overall of his speech?
Yeah, well, I think what we've seen with the United Nations General Assembly this week or so are two major seminal speeches, one by Donald J. Trump, a truth teller to be sure, who laid a case out dealing with the UN and its members and their complete hypocrisy and falsehood and lies that they tell. They're supposed to be organized to prevent wars, can't do it. They're supposed to be organized to stop wars, can't do it. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'll tell you what, I told this to Netanyahu's face. I said, I look at you and I see Churchill. I see the same resolve and determination to fight to the end to accomplish your objective despite the obstacles and the impediments that are around you and inside your own government. And I see President Trump as Roosevelt, who's there, unequivocal support to you, doesn't necessarily agree with everything, provides counsel and guidance in a relationship. That was what Churchill and Roosevelt were all about. And that speech that he delivered today was a seminal speech from a truth teller, just like Donald J. Trump. And I agree totally with the attacking the false narratives that exist out there with genocide, starvation, and all of the false narratives surrounding the Palestinian state and what does that really mean. As we all know what it means to the people who have the guns, it means the elimination of the Jewish state. Now, who can tolerate anything like that?
Right.
And so, and let's identify the people that walked out and the demonstration that they're making by that for our audience to understand. The UN is a body that is largely anti-Israel. It has a history of significant anti-Semitism, and it has an undercurrent for years of anti-Americanism. That's what's walked out of that room. The world still listened to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and if you scan the Q card that he wanted you to do, there are graphic videos there and there are graphic pictures there that help you understand what I was privileged to see when I was in Israel of the horror of October the 7th. And I certainly applaud the Prime Minister in identifying what he has achieved and underscore what the incredible possibilities are into helping to stabilize and normalize the Middle East as a result of that achievement. And John emphasized it again, and I don't need to repeat it. A lot of opportunity in front of us. Bring the war in Gaza to an end, and let's get on with the rest of it.
To that point, Jennifer, here was a moment in Netanyahu's speech where he very firmly called out and sent a message to other countries opposing Israel. Listen.
That over time, many world leaders buckled. They buckled under the pressure of a biased media, radical Islamist constituencies, and anti-Semitic mobs. There's a familiar saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved. And here's the shameful result of that collapse. For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism with many of your nations opposing us. Astoundingly, as we fight the terrorists who murdered many of your citizens, you are fighting us.
Jennifer, your reaction to the speech.
Well, I think those are very strong words, of course, from the Israeli Prime Minister, but all eyes will be on Monday, the meeting in the White House with President Trump. And this is coming and it was very clear from Prime Minister Netanyahu that he was addressing President Trump directly in this speech. But this comes at a moment of high tension between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. You could hear the frustration in President Trump's voice yesterday as he was asked about talk of Israel annexing the West Bank. He said that will not happen under his watch. He will not allow it. That came as a result of conversations with Arab leaders. He also is extremely frustrated after the September 9th strike that surprised the White House against Hamas when Israel, under Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership, tried to assassinate a top Hamas leader at a key moment of negotiations to try and get the hostages out. That is going to likely come up in the meeting. And so while President Trump and this White House has been very supportive of the Israeli people, there is frustration with the Prime Minister of Israel right now in the White House.
That's a question I wanted to ask Trey. Could you speak just in the short time we have remaining, Trey, about the domestic political situation for Netanyahu there in Israel?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under immense domestic political pressure. His far-right coalition wants him to continue the war and completely occupy the Gaza Strip. We do know the American administration, President Trump, wants to see an end to this conflict. He is a deal maker. He has sent his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and others like Adam Boehler to the region trying to reach some sort of agreement. And so we can expect more push from the Americans to try and get some sort of deal together that would ultimately de-escalate the situation across the Middle East, stop the suffering for Palestinian civilians, thousands of whom are dying each month, and also, most importantly, free the remaining hostages that are being held by Hamas. And I think that really underscores what Israel's prime minister was trying to get across today. You saw the lapel pin he was wearing. And if you go to the QR code there, you go to a website, and ultimately it shows some of the atrocities that took place here on the ground on the morning of October 7th, the day those hostages were taken.
Thank you for that, Trey. John, I'll get a final thought from you before we go.
Well, I just think it was a very, very strong speech at the United Nations. Again, all of this hinges on the war in Gaza, the war against Hamas being brought to a close. Hamas has been decimated, to be sure, as Netanyahu said, but they're still hanging on there. And if Israel were to capitulate to nations' calls from around the world to end this war right now, that would leave Hamas in charge. That would give them a huge victory, and that's just something that Israel cannot live with.
What a great panel we had to react to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech. Thank you all, and I'm sure we'll see you later today. All of you. I know we're going to see you later today. Thank you so much.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.